Are you recording? Ah, there we go.
You heard? Oh, I didn't even know from your side if you heard it. So,
I did. I heard the American woman telling us that she's recording.
oh,
Good to have her on staff.
that was me with I put on that voice. It took me about 20
One of your
takes.
impressions.
Yeah, I'm an
Excellent.
impressionist. Just say one of my 20 comics. To be fair, I don't know why I was I'm actually putting a nice shirt for this one, but you're not really going
Oh,
to
okay.
appreciate that, are you?
No, but no, but it's not necessarily just for my benefit. It's presumably for the other people who are watching as well.
Well, you've got a lovely shirt on as
I
well,
don't know
David.
what. Oh, wonderful, excellent. Oh, that's good to know. If nothing else, people can appreciate the sartorial choices.
No, we don't know, but David's not wearing anything else. It's just the shirt. So if he does stand up halfway through the bit, then we are in trouble. Right. Hello, welcome to another episode.
I like the fact. Sorry, you left a pause, and I thought, well, I'll let you continue. But the way you paused that long, that I felt that you wanted me to then take that and riff with it, and I very much didn't, Daniel.
You did.
And I do apologise.
But the perfect example of my absolute dog shit crowd work, where I paused. There's no.
No, it was my fault. I did not. Yes, and I very much just give you the silent treatment there, but I was doing that purely from a utilitarian purpose of thinking that you wanted to proceed with the podcast. So I hope you don't feel cowed by what I did there.
You're the people's hero, David. You're the people's hero. So I'll actually do the introduction bit. I think it's the longest I've got into a pod without doing the introduction. So, we're already breaking records here. Hello, welcome to another episode of Sit Down for Stand Up. I have with me today David Eagle. How's it going, David? We good?
Yes, very well, thank you. And if I wasn't, I probably wouldn't tell you because, well, it's not really that kind of podcast, is it?
It can be anything you want to be honest. It's a safe space. It's a tree of trust.
Right. Well, I have this terrible rash, Danny. I don't know if you can help with this at all. No, I'm very well, very well.
Well, what was my always growing up? Mine was always anything I had. My mum just slapped pseudo cream on me.
Okay.
I don't. That seems like any illness whatsoever. Like a cut from coldness. Pseudo cream was the trick. So, David, reason for the podcast is to talk to comedians such as yourself. Talk about your journey, what you've been through, highs and lows, and hopefully try to inspire some new comedians or people who have never been on the stage for the first time to sort of say sod it and jump up on the mic. So I always start with the same question: how and why did we get into comedy?
Well, I got into comedy because it was very much a byproduct of what I was doing at the time, what I still do, being a folk musician in a folk band, and I've done that since 2005. And you find that, especially being in a band, I think with folk music, there is, firstly, there's an intention of introducing what the songs are about, so you're talking there. It's not like, you go to see some bands, and there's nothing wrong with this, but you go to see some bands and they literally just like start. I remember once seeing the Kings of Leon, and it was very much just like they did 3 songs, and then they'd go, "Hey, we are the Kings of Leon," and then they'd play another song, and then they'd do it again a bit later on. It's like, I think, like, we know who you are. Like, people have bought tickets to their crowd work, as it was, people call things, there was literally none of it. There was nothing in between the songs. Oh, that's absolutely fine. But in folk music, that's not the case. Even the shyest of people will have something. They'll introduce what the songs are about. The songs have got stories connected with them. But then also, there's just an expectancy to just be down to earth and just have a bit of a chat almost and just be a bit loose with it. And so that's what would happen. Something would happen on the way to the gig, or something would happen while we were at the festival, and we just talk about it, and tell stories, and audiences would laugh. And so you'd build that you build that up more and more. And then eventually we'd talk so much in between the songs, it was getting ridiculous. Eventually, especially me, and then people would say, "Oh, you should do stand-up comedy." And I'm not sure if that was necessarily because they thought I was particularly funny, or if they just thought if he, exercises those demons in a comedy club, maybe the bastard will shut up and actually will get a song in.
I mean, I watched your stuff, and my favourite joke of yours is about the eyes looking towards the light. Praise Jesus. That always tickled me. So so we did our folk music first, then we moved into the comedy. Did you find it quite easy to transition into because you was on the stage doing crowd work?
Well, I think the thing is, it helped, and I think one thing that helped was just coming into it maybe from a different perspective. You know, I wasn't coming into comedy because I'd seen it on the TV necessarily. I mean, I was aware of like TV comedy, and I was aware of, you know, I listened to a lot of Radio 4 and things like that, but I wasn't coming into it with this idea of like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and do Live at the Apollo or anything like that. It was kind of like very much just a continuation. It's like, will this work in front of a different audience? You know, but you soon found in some ways that it sort of doesn't at the start, because with the folk stuff, people, a lot of them know who you are, so they know who I am, and they've bought into, you know, they've followed you for years. If they haven't, there's plenty of people around them who have, so they get swept up in it. And also, they're there for the music, so the comedy is very much an ancillary factor. You know, it's very much like a happy thing, a happy extra thing that they're getting. Whereas that's not the case with comedy. You can't go, oh well, if I make them laugh, it's a bonus. But you know, I'll do a couple of songs, and you know, you can't. So suddenly, what you're doing, you're putting the ancillary part into the foreground, I suppose, the background part into the foreground. So yeah, and also I didn't realize there was a nice friendly open mic scene, so I started in I actually did my first gig in sort of 2014, which was the King Gong in Manchester, at Manchester's Comedy Store. And
How's your first gig?
Well, yes, it was. I'm going to preface it by saying that I didn't start doing stand-up comedy to 2018. So this is going to give you some idea of what it was like 4 years later, you know.
My first gig was Comedy Store King Gong in London.
Right, so okay.
We've got that I bet you did better than me. You go first.
I don't know. How long did you do? What happened?
1 minute 23.
Probably heard this, haven't they?
1 minute 23. I went up with no material. I said this is the first time I've ever done comedy, and I sort of like I coasted for a minute. I think out of sympathy. They were like, oh, okay, and then they were like, right, sympathy over. Let's get him off.
What I love about this is, because the operative word, you know, the comedy, the fact that you said, this is the first time I've done comedy. And they're probably, you know, if they really wanted to be harsh, they're like, well, you haven't actually done any comedy yet. Like, it's the first time you've stood on stage, you know, trying to do. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's just something really funny about it. This is the first time I've done comedy, because obviously, you know, you haven't actually at this point haven't really made a joke. But in fairness, like, you don't know that.
For 3 years of my life, I've never made a joke once. I've been saving it for this moment.
Well, not in front of a no, yeah, exactly. It's the first time I've done comedy. In fact, I'm not very funny in social situations. I'm not entirely sure what's possessed me to do this, to be honest.
I've heard about this knock joke theory.
Yeah. It's so interesting, though, that first gig. And the thing is, I'd had experience of it. I mean, there were some other things as well. To be honest, I had... oh God, have I told? I don't know if I've told anyone. I must have told this on a podcast. Anyway, if I haven't, never mind. I'll tell you. I had, because I'd done a BBC presenting course, which is for disabled people being blind. I did this BBC presenting course, and it was very kind of difficult to get on it, but I passed the audition, and it was for like radio and television. And one of the people who were there watching one of the things that we were doing was the agent at the time of Russell Brand. Remember him? And he wanted to meet with me afterwards. And I had a series of meetings with Russell Brand's agent. And so that was another reason, like, where the comedy, well, that wasn't meant to do comedy. That was for like radio and TV stuff. This would have been like 2012, 13. And I had meetings with like Six Music and a Radio 2 things, but obviously no one knew who I was, so there was no way anyone was going to give me any employment there. And so I was slightly concerned that he was going to give up on me. And so I said, well, I could maybe do stand-up. And I sent him a recording of me doing like a bit of chat at the folk thing, at the folk festivals. And he said, this is precisely what you should be doing. And you need, and also the thing I'd sent him was talking about something had happened because of being blind. It was like some weird story, some drama that had occurred that wouldn't have happened if you could have seen. And I said, this is what you need to do. You need to play on the blindness. You know, you really need to. And I thought, oh, well, if I was doing comedy, I wasn't necessarily planning on doing that. He said, no, that's what you must do. And so, then I thought, well, I'm forced into it now. So I then had to do the King Gong and send him the recording of that. So my first ever experience of doing comedy, I sent to the agent of Russell Brand.
Nice.
And that's only probably the second worst thing of his career. But so I'll tell you what happened. So basically, for those people who don't know, the King Gong at the Comedy Store is this really gladiatorial event where audience members are given red cards to hold up, and if 3 red cards got held up, the comedian is dismissed with a gong being banged in their ear. You know, so I had deafness to go along with the blindness as well. This really loud gong just suddenly goes. And I went on, but unfortunately, I was first on. I mean, maybe, unfortunately.
I think second's
maybe, unfortunately,
first is hard.
I don't know in some ways, because like at least I didn't know what to expect. But anyway, I went on, and it was Mick Ferry, the wonderful comedian Mick Ferry, comparing it, and I went on, and I think I managed like a minute. At least managed better than minute 23. I can't remember what I did, to be honest, but I got to about a minute in, and all of a sudden I heard this really loud voice from someone in the audience who just shouted, "Wanker! Wanker!" And I thought, bloody hell! I was thinking, you know, what have I done to like? You know, maybe I haven't been to his taste, but that seems needlessly vitriolic, you know. Anyway, so Wanker comes, and of course I'm really kind of like unsure of how to develop from here. So I thought, do I just pretend this didn't happen and just continue with my script? Or do I try and factor it into the thing, like riff with it a little bit? Like, you know, I don't know. But while I was thinking this, my mouth was essentially not proceeding with doing either. It just essentially went, sort of almost just like was trying to think. And I was like, you know, so I just sort of made a series of noises. And then I thought, yeah, I'm clearly not very good at riffing in the moment. Let's stick to the script. So after making this series of noises, I then tried to go back to what I was talking about. But of course, everything had been completely derailed. And about 10 seconds later, I heard this voice shout, "2 cards."
Oh, yeah, that's the,
And I thought 2 cards, but nobody shouted 1 card yet. And then I realised, because I had nothing to go on, there was not someone in the audience shouting "wanker." It was the person on the microphone shouting 1 card to announce that 1 card had gone up. So now my thought was, this is quite a funny thing, I thought. You know, I thought maybe I could riff on this. I could say, 2 cards. I thought you were shouting, someone in the audience shouting, "Why?" I think that could have really worked and really kind of gained favour with the audience. And I was thinking, do I do that or do I stick to the script? But again, because wasn't experienced, my mouth just moved, and I just did some more. And at that point, the audience just thought, I think he's malfunctioning, and maybe thought, for his own good, we better put him out of his misery. 3 cards. The gong sounded, and off I went. So, yeah, let's just imagine it from the audience perspective, in fairness. And this can be a very gladiatorial night. The audience can be absolute pricks, really, but they are encouraged to be, in fairness. But from the audience perspective, what had happened was I had essentially gone... They'd heard 1 card, and then I'd just kind of went... So, yeah, it was very odd, but that was my first ever experience, and that's what I sent to the agent of Russell Brand. I didn't try again until another year, and I just didn't communicate with him again. And then a year later, I said, "I'm really sorry. I couldn't do it after that. But I'm back." And in fairness to him, we had another meeting, and he said, "Right, you need to keep at it this time. You can't not." And or maybe that was 2018. Actually, I think I'd left it 3 years. 4 years. I think I left it 4 years. And then came back and said, "I'm really sorry." And in fairness to him, he gave me another meeting. What's really weird about it is I'll move. I'll let you speak in a second. The
This is
I
perfect.
then
The less
sort
I
of
talk,
like,
the better. Oh, I'm
well, I
loving
then
this.
figured it out a little bit. I went back in April 2018 and I did the Frog and Bucket in
Yeah,
Manchester, which is another kind of gladiatorial
it's a little
King
bit
Kong
nicer
type.
though, isn't it?
Maybe a little bit nicer. I mean, so much so that I went on stage. I had an idea of a story that I was going to tell, which is a story that I told on tour with the band. It's actually that story that you were talking about when I was in Australia, and this bloke asks me, he says, "Are you on drugs?" And I assume he means because my eyes are erratically moving around, which is precisely what he did mean. But when I reveal that it's because I'm blind, he just says, "Oh, well, that's a shame because I was looking for some drugs." So there's quite a bit of a ramble up to that point. But that was the story. And that's the story that I told at the Frog and Bucket. And it went really well. And I told some other bits and it went really well. And the 5 minutes I got through. And since then, I've never looked back. I did the next gig was the King Gong at London Comedy Store, and
Yep.
I made it there. I didn't get gonged off there,
Well done.
and Manchester, and I didn't get gonged off there. And I thought, and then somebody said, you know that there's open mic nights where you go, you don't have to do these gladiatorial things. And I thought I didn't realise that. So I did the open mic scene and really liked it and made some nice friends and did some nice audience. Did some nice audiences. Well, you got to get them on side somehow. Had some nice audiences and it's just progressed from there. But the irony is, since then, since 2018, once I started then winning a few like competitions, like the Leicester Square thing, weirdly, Russell Brand's agent, he just completely disappeared, didn't respond to any of my emails. So I don't know if he just thought, well, my job's done. Obviously, I don't represent really comedians. Russell Brand's was the exception because he's mainly a radio and TV person. He doesn't represent any other comedians. So maybe he just thought, right, well, my job's done. Or maybe he just, I don't know, he just didn't bother at all. It was quite weird. It all just sort of disappeared. But by that point, I'd already got the bug and I loved doing comedy. And so I never looked back. Yeah. There you go. Condense that into one sentence for your listeners. With bite-size edition. Did you say in your email it's like a 25-minute episode?
Yeah, we're done now. That was easy.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, the thing is, like, you sort of did it the other way round then, because a lot of comedians, some of them will never even dare to do a gong show, or they'll wait after a couple of years being in the business to then start to attempt them. So you sort of, just jump straight into the deep end on that one.
Well, one reason for doing I'll tell you what my mindset was in 2018. It was, I really want to do this. I'm annoyed that I have lost 4 years where I could have been doing this. And I'm clearly, like, it's eating away at me. I need to do it. And I saw on the Frog and Bucket thing, which I think because I just literally typed out starting out in comedy. I was living in Manchester at the time, so Comedy Store and Frog and Bucket had gone along. I'd never been to any of them, so I didn't know what it was. I'd not experienced it. I'd obviously now experienced the King Kong, but I'd not experienced it. And they said, look, we have a lot of people pulling out because people get nervous. We operate we give you a grace one where you can pull out once, but anything after that, we're not going to book you again. So I thought, well, I can't pull out. So what I'll do is I'll just book it in. Booked it in, thought, well, I can't cancel it now. And so I had to show up. So it was that accountability factor. I think accountability is so important because if you just sort of go, oh, I might do it, I might turn up to that open mic night, but these show up and play things, well, there's no good doing that. You need to just have some accountability. And so that's what I did. And there was no trains back from, actually I was living in Sheffield at the time. There was no trains back from Manchester to Sheffield. There must have been something wrong with the rails or something. So I had to get a bus. So it took absolutely ages to get back. The journey was like 3 hours and it just was absolutely horrible. But because I was even though I had a 3-hour bus journey, it didn't bring me down to earth. No. I absolutely loved it. And that feeling, my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, there's no better feeling in the world than when you've gone on stage and you've killed it.
And there's just that idea of just when they just laugh and you go, oh my goodness, they're laughing, and it's good to get your first gig underway like that and do well, because it must be more difficult if it doesn't go well. I mean, I know it didn't go well necessarily for me in 2014, but by this point I was like, this story works. You get later down the line and you know you can get difficult gigs. So that's why it must be difficult, because if your first gig is a difficult one, you kind of assume maybe, oh, I'm not very funny. So at least having a really good first gig, let's call it the first gig because it was really second gig or whatever. But, that's when I started. At least that meant this does work. So yeah, I'm fortunate in that respect.
Was it sort of at that moment where you sort of said to yourself, you know what, I can do this? Or did it take a couple of more gigs to, really think to yourself, this is what I want?
No, I thought I can do it. And also, like, just from a career progression, like since 2013, I was professional doing music. I didn't have another job.
Yeah.
So, suddenly I was like, well, this is another thing I can do now. And I
Mm.
don't mean like literally then. I was like, oh, obviously this is it now, comedy. And I imagine the comedy will probably usurp the folk music. And, the other two have been saying, well, I can't be getting any gigs in. Oh, because I'm doing live. It wasn't like that. But it was like, oh, this is another possibility of a thing. But it wasn't like career minded. I didn't have like a game plan. And actually, I didn't really, I didn't know how the comedy thing worked. I didn't know about all anything like that. But for me, it was just about, oh, I love this. So yeah, I mean, obviously I did, and I had a run of good gigs. As I say, the London comedy, I did like the London Comedy Store King Gong. The week after that was unbelievably rowdy, but I made that through with no cards. Manchester, I made through. I didn't win the Gong Show, but the person who did win it was it Kay Barron or something, a Canadian comedian who'd come all the way from Canada. Oh, believe it or not, she's a Canadian comedian. And, she was quite experienced and she won it. So, yeah, like that but it didn't bother me because I didn't realise at the end you had to do a minute extra if you got through to decide who won the full thing. And quite rightly, she won it. But it wasn't about winning it. I wasn't planning on being the best on the night. It was just the fact that I was clearly good enough to keep these people's interests for 5 minutes.
And also with gong shows, not everyone there is a new comedian. You can get some heavy hitters on there, and people who have been doing it for years, gong shows. And do you know what I mean that they're killers? They absolutely smash them week in, week out.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I wouldn't keep doing it. I mean, like, it's not something I think, like, I know you get a gig at the Comedy Store and stuff, like you get a 10-minute spot at the Comedy Store if you win. But I mean, well, I've done the Comedy Store quite a bit now. I've been on a not reasonably regular basis, like the proper like 20-minute spot and stuff. But and it wasn't through doing the King Gong. Like I got my first 10 minutes, nothing to do with doing the King Gong. It was like 2021 or something when I probably got my first 10 minutes, So I had nothing to do with that. So there's always ways. It's not like the King Gong is the only way. I know there's a lot of people who return time and time again. But the trouble is, actually, some of them might do worse because they...
I've lost you for a sec.
Okay.
Nope. Got. There's some intermission music. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I've done 2 gong shows. One Comedy Store, first ever one. It was I sort of emailed them at 5 o'clock in the evening, seeing if I could perform there that night. They got back to me at 6 o'clock. So it was literally on the day. I did the Blackout a couple of weeks ago, which was going well, but then I made a joke that I thought of literally walking on stage, and it didn't go too well. And that was
right, okay.
It was like bomb, 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 straight away. 1 card, 2 card, 3 card. So it was always
it's another one. Sorry for disappearing. But yeah, it's an odd one though, isn't it? It's because it's also a different environment. Because if you're a comedian, if you're on a proper club set bill, then you are there and the audience assume you're there because you deserve to be there, but they are actively told the opposite here. They're told that you're new and this might be your first time and all of this, and they've also been given cards to hold up. And part of the thing, it's a sport for them. Part of it is doing that, is carding you off. So it's very different to doing an actual real gig. Because in a real gig, you can have peaks and troughs. You can make references to stuff. You can, this is. I mean, I'd love to almost like parachute in certain comedians. I mean, there'd be some who would do it, but I imagine you could probably take some of the best comedians, and for whatever reason, the audience would just be like, no, we're carding them off, just because it's funny to do it. And also, if they are really experienced, they're more incredulous. They react. Someone's like, yes, they'd hold the cards up. So it's just different environment, really.
That'd be a great idea for a TV show. You get well-known comedians. You have to like they do like the makeup and stuff to make them look completely different.
Yeah.
They've got to write a new set of 5 minutes, then they've got to go up and see if they get gonged off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily people would. I mean, maybe people would agree with it to do it. I mean, yeah, if they do it in a different voice, and they could try it. I mean, maybe they could say, "Oh, I'm trying a different style of comedy," so that might be quite fun. But yeah, it could be a really interesting way of kind of reinventing yourself. I mean, what happens if it goes so well that you go, "I've never done a gig as well as this before. I'm gonna have to be I'm gonna have to be South African all the time."
Well, I was speaking to Ali Woods, fantastic comedian, about a week ago, and he got gonged off his first 2 shows. And look at him now. Look at him now. Do you know what I mean? Selling out, theatres. But he got gonged off the first 2. So it does have no benchmark of your comedic abilities. It is just on that night. If you've got, 3 people who are out for blood, it just is what it is.
The amount of now famous comedians who did that gong show and got gonged off within a few seconds is astronomical. There's so many examples of it, and you forget that.
You've got to earn your stripes.
Yeah.
You got to do it. So, okay, I'm going to go into more topics sort of catered for yourself. Do you think, from when you started to where you are now, it's sort of become easier for a disabled comedian to get on a set? Because there's some absolute killers coming up now who are really making it.
Yeah, but I don't think there was no reason why. Nobody ever said, "Oh, we're not booking you because you're blind." Sometimes there might have been a thing saying, "We've already got." If Jamie McDonald was doing it or something, they'd go because he's also blind. They'd go, they might not book the 2 of us because but that's fair play. I mean, that's because we might be talking about similar stuff. I once did a gig. Hopefully, Jamie won't mind me saying this, but we just won't tell him. I did a gig where I was meant to be on the same bill as him, and I got told by the promoter, he said, "Can I do another week because I don't want to, be on necessarily with David because we might tread on each other's toes," which is fair. I a more experienced comedian at the time going, "Oh yeah, I probably did it for my benefit rather than anything else," but. I think that's fine because if we're both talking about the same type of thing, I mean, I don't just talk about being blind. I've got different stories. But when it comes to a club set, a lot of it is about being blind because you've just literally got 20 minutes or whatever to set up your who you are, your character in a way. So it becomes like address the elephant in the room. If there's one, I can't see it, but, I'm blind, some jokes about that. I do a song that's not necessarily related to anything to being blind. There's stories about being blind, but it's not just like I'm blind, and it's kind of like this stuff wouldn't happen if you could see. So that's my kind of angle. But then I've got loads of other stuff like that has nothing to do with being blind that I will do in a longer set or a festival set or my own solo tour or whatever,
But you say it's sort of like it's the bit.
Sorry, I didn't answer your question. I've absolutely no idea whether it's easier. I never felt that it wasn't easy for me, personally.
I think it gets to the point, if you're funny, you're funny. And then that is the bottom line of comedy. And comedy has a great filtering process that if you're not funny, you will, you will fall off it eventually. I mean, I've seen a lot of your stuff, and, is it most because, would you say the blind stuff is the stuff you've done the most? So it has naturally just become, your gut, like, not your best work because all your work's good, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's your honed set.
Yeah, well, it's also because it's the immediate thing that they see. I don't do this, but a lot of comedians, will do, I'll know what you're thinking. Or if they don't say, I know what you're thinking, they will address the thing that is about them. And the reason for that is because it saves, like for me, if I didn't go on and mention I was blind, I know, you're talking about on a Saturday night or something, the audience would just start talking to each other going, wow, what's going on? Is he blind? Is he, and you don't want that. You want to own that thing from the outset. So, one strategy, make a joke of it right from the top, never mention it again. Or what happens is you make a joke about it, another joke then springs off the back of that. That's how comedy works. You start writing something, then you sort of go, oh, this thing, that there's a joke there, and then that joke springs off another joke, and then you get a topper for that one, and so the whole thing just keeps going, and before you know it, you've got a 20-minute set that's kind of like, I'm blind, with a lot of different intricacies and nuances. Some bits are one-liners, some bits have got nothing to do with being blind, some are stories that happen because you happen to be blind, but I think at the start, I mean, my core stuff really is why I even say, why am I talking about being blind? It's firstly because I know from experience that audiences will whisper to each other if I don't mention it. Got some jokes about that. Also, I know that people will Google if I don't mention it on stage. Got some jokes about that. I've got some, it just happens, like stuff like that. And then you set your stall out when you can't see. A lot of weird things will happen. Here's some examples, Sounds quite formulaic when you put it like that, but that's essentially what the club set then becomes.
Yeah, well, it does get to a point where you do find your own formula, and when you know it works, it works. Why rock the boat?
Yeah, and also I don't worry too much about banging on about blindness because I often start the set after about a minute in with a song that's got nothing to do with being blind, a comedy song, and I end the set with a song that's got nothing to do with being blind. And a lot of my jokes have nothing to do with being blind. So I don't think anyone could accuse me of just going, oh, all he does is talk about being blind. It's like, well, if you deconstruct the set, you probably find that half of it has got nothing to do with blindness. And also, a lot of the stories, you're like, even though they wouldn't happen because they're blind, it's not like my jokes are like, oh, well, that happened because I can't see. It's all the little bits. It's like you were talking about when I said, are you referring to my eyes, to the Australian, because my eyes sometimes move around in their sockets searching for the light, praise the Lord. That's not a blind joke. That's just a play on words.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, you have to say it almost dismissively. It wouldn't work. Well, maybe it would work. I don't know, but yeah.
So, so what if there's somebody, they're looking to get into comedy, they're not too sure, how it's going to go, they're a bit worried. What sort of advice would you give them?
I'd say there's too many comedians as it is, so don't bother. No, I'd say no. I honestly think it's worth doing. I think it's worth doing for a number of reasons. Firstly, for a confidence one, like you might establish that, like it might get you over the fear of public speaking or something like that. So maybe if that's the case, do a stand-up comedy course. Maybe like not to necessarily even do comedy, like just. Like my wonderful friend Silky, Paul Silky White, he runs a comedy course in Leeds. And what's great about that is that there are people on it who don't even necessarily want to do stand-up. They'll have to do a 5-minute stand-up set at the end of it in front of friends and family. But they might just want to do it because they want to be more confident or do public speaking, or maybe they want to do comedy writing even. That's another thing. You can be really funny, but you just maybe you struggle with the performance. One of the bits of advice I'd give is it's so easy to fall into the trap of remembering everything that you have written word for word. Now that's fine, but you have to try and remember that this is a performance, and it can be so difficult when you're nervous. But so many times I hear people talking colloquially, so they've written as they want to speak, but they're not delivering it as if you would actually speak it like that. So, I don't know, they'll come on and they'll say, so what can I tell you about myself? And it's like, well, you know what you can tell us about yourself because you've written this out. You've actually written probably, what can I tell you about myself? It's like, why do that? Why not just say, so I was doing this, or I am, like, just be a bit more rather than what can I tell you about myself? Or some people will say, I should probably tell you something about me. Or, something like that. I don't know, like I think audiences kind of get wise to it, especially if they've seen a lot and if they're on the open mic stuff and they see. And I think immediately, and I don't even think this is conscious, subconsciously, if you get like, oh, what can I tell you about myself? Or, here's the thing about me, or whatever it is. And I completely understand it. I'm not ridiculing anyone for doing it, but my other point was, like, you remember you're speaking this, so maybe like think, how would I say this with confidence? Like rather than just sort of delivering your lines as written, because I think a lot of people do that. And then some of those people become the best comedy writers. They just realize that they don't have the stage presence to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if that helps at all.
No, I completely.
Sorry?
No, so I completely agree with that. And it is half a stone. Half the show is your sort of persona, your character. It's not just you can write the best jokes ever. If you can't deliver them to save your life, then well, it's there's other roads in comedy.
I've been gigging a lot with Gary Delaney. I say lots, the last 4 gigs with Gary Delaney. And he, like, he's a great one-liner. Somebody else got up and just did those. In fact, when he started out, he did them deadpan. It didn't work, but it's the fact that he's enjoying it. It's the way that he's saying it. He's completely mastered the craft. He knows exactly what he's doing. I think that's really, but he's performing it, and he's laughing at the joke, and he's responding to how the audience responds. So, even in the moment, he's going, okay, right, okay, okay, you like that? Let's try another one of those. And so he's bringing the audience in, and it's obviously in some ways easier for him because they know who he is now. But it is developing that persona, and for me, it's stuttering every 5 minutes. There, that's my persona, my persona, and I don't know. That's the thing. It's about like being that version of yourself, working out who your character is and letting the audience tell you who they are. And if you don't like who they're telling you are, then kind of go away and write something else or be different on stage,
Okay. I'll go off you then, David. Would you advise new comedians to do every single room possible? Or do you think they should sort of tailor make, like choose rooms carefully based on their own comedy?
Well, it's difficult because sometimes you don't have a choice when you first start out. You go to an open mic night and it's in less desirable conditions. I'd say be mindful of that. Like, it's so difficult. If I do a bad gig, sometimes it can be because of the room. The room just isn't right for
starting out.
Especially starting out. So it's about being mindful, going, okay, are these conditions, were they desirable for what I wanted to do? Because then you can kind of go, when do I succeed the most? Well, if it's in rooms where there's an audience there, which helps, rather than just all comedians. If it's a room where the audience is listening and are attentive, and it just feels a nice atmosphere, that's great. Because if you're getting good laughs, you kind of go, well, that's who I can be. And it's trying to remember that. And it's so difficult when you start out because you sort of go, I've just done a bad gig. All of a sudden, you forget all the fact that you might have just done 3 really good gigs in a row, and you kind of go, "Oh God, no, I'm not good at this, and I'm not good at it." And I do this. I have these really flat moments, and then I do a gig, and it's absolutely brilliant, like a big theatre gig, and the wave of laughter just hits you, and you end up improvising because you're more relaxed, and you go, "Bloody hell, I've conquered comedy!" Word's gonna get out about this, and then you do a gig the following day. And you just go, oh, why do I do this? So you've got to, and I think a lot of comedians are emotionally volatile. I think that goes with the kind of people we are,
Comedy makes you bipolar.
Yeah, and also it's that thing of like, well, it's, you're putting yourself out there. It's a very vulnerable thing to do. So I don't know, just be mindful of that and kind of go like, if you've done 50 gigs and you've only had 1 good gig, then maybe you need to go, well, that might have been a false positive. But if it's succeeding half of the time or even a third of the time, you can kind of go, why did that not work? And it might have been because you weren't as confident in the room. So the other bit of advice is, and it's a one that should go without saying, record your gigs.
Yes.
Record every gig. Audio is brilliant. Video probably is better. I mean, obviously I can't see, so I can't study body language and stuff. I am thinking of trying to use AI. I've not done it yet, but trying to use AI to recognize body language and things that I do to see whether if it looks at a certain gig, goes, at that point, you look really confident. And if I go, well, yeah, and that's because they laughed brilliantly the time before. And then they might go, at this point, your body language slumps or it does this. I wonder if it can, and I might go, oh yeah, that's maybe why the joke didn't work, because I didn't look very confident, and I wouldn't be getting any of that. And I could try asking like my wife or something, but she might not even notice certain things, because a lot of body language stuff is subconscious. So I'm intrigued to know. It might not work. It might not work, but I am intrigued to try and use some, AI to see if it can just do that. It might not work. It might not work, but I think if it can't work now, it will be able to work.
You'd have to plan that, like one gig, you'd have to say, right, okay, so on this bit, I am gonna, elongate the arms.
No. What I mean is, I'm not trying to do different types of body language. I just give it a video, and I give it another video, and or even just one video it could work from. I just say, which bits do I look the most confident, and which bits do I look where I might be belying a lack of confidence, that's what I mean, if it explains it better. Okay. So I'm not trying to force it. I'm not kind of going, at this point I'm going to put, because I don't know I have a rough idea, but I don't know what like negative body language is necessarily, or I've got some rough ideas, but when I'm on stage, I'm not thinking like that. I'm not going, oh, I'm doing this with my body. I'm doing this with my body now. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think that could be really useful for me, and it could be like, sometimes I find I do a better gig if sometimes, not always, if I'm not, it depends on the room, if I've not got a microphone, because if it's the perfect, I've said that, and
I'm going to get that one out of the way.
I've just karate chopped. If you're not listening, if you're only listening to this, I said, I'd be better if I'm not using a microphone, and then I gesticulated in my hand and karate chopped the microphone across the other side of the room. Now that's theatre, my friends. My Fringe show, it was a 50-seater room. I didn't need a microphone for it, and I loved that because it meant I could move about a bit, and I could be more expressive with my hands, and I found that helped the gig a little bit. Where sometimes you're holding the mic, but it's not a necessarily thing. Or sometimes keep the microphone on the microphone stand, and sometimes I notice I'm moving a bit more. So I don't know. It's just worth me experimenting and seeing if I could do. I don't know how we got into that. I can't remember what the question was that even got us into that. It probably was, what did you have for breakfast? But there it is. There's the tangent.
No, it's interesting. I'd be curious to see how, AI will progress. I do ask this question sometimes. Do you think AI has a place when it comes to comedy writing?
Okay, so I have used, literally in the last week, have started using it a little bit, not to come up with jokes, but literally just to give me alternative ways of phrasing something. So I might write something, and it'll just, and sometimes what I love is when it tries to write a joke. It thinks, oh, brilliant, we're doing comedy, are we? And it'll try and write, you could say this. And I'm like, you're worse than, like, Joe blogs in the street. You're worse than the taxi driver goes, hey, here's a one for you. You're worse than that, AI. Yeah. Like, you literally, your idea of what's funny is just, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, it doesn't understand like comedy. But what it does understand, I think, is it understands like sentence structure, and it can think of like synonyms and antonyms, and it can think of, like, I don't know, like just, or it can very quickly just if you just literally say, rearrange this sentence and give me 10 different versions, it'll do it, and you suddenly go, oh my goodness, like that is so much funnier there, and sometimes I'll ignore it and sometimes I won't, and now and again, like, I will use it. Like, I was doing a thing about how was that when I was a kid, like listening to shortwave radio, and the shortwave radio like has so many different radio stations from all over the world. So there's nothing like FM where you know what you're getting. Like, this is like Mongolian throat singing and like American evangelists screaming that you're going to hell. And I was listening to this at the age of 7 in bed. And at one point, part of the show, I mean, I shouldn't really, basically I stumbled across like some kind of drama that involved some kind of like sex scene or something, but from the radio. So I talk about, imagine getting that when you're 7, and then I imagine all the implications. Is this like Lonely Sailors? Is this like their porn fix? They listen to the shipping forecast on Radio 4, and now they're listening to the lesbians on the shortwave band, you know. So I was talking about this, and I put some stuff that I'd written, and one thing it said was, it was like shortwave radio. It's like the Wild West of radio. And I thought, well, that's quite a good term, Wild West. But I thought, would it make sense? And I know it's a bit of an antiquated phrase, but I said, would it be better in some ways to say the Wild West of the wireless? It's got such a lovely Wild West of the wireless about it. Now, I'm aware that younger people won't think. Yeah. Younger. Oh, you just reminded me of a joke that I completely forgot. I must put that in the set. No, but it's that thing of going, well, maybe it wouldn't work because, it's just a turn of phrase. It's not a joke. It's just a way of kind of going the Wild West of the wireless. But I think that's really evocative. Then I thought, well, let's try and do some more alliteration. And these aren't jokes, by the way, so it may not even work. It's actually for a radio series that I'm doing that I'm not really meant to talk about at the moment. But I thought maybe something like, I don't know, it was like a going on a radio roller coaster ride of randomness, or you could flip that around, a roller coaster ride of radio randomness, or random radio, or whatever. Just this lovely turn of phrase that you've got. That's not funny, but it's just transporting them, and then you hit them with a joke. So I like it for that. Because sometimes the hardest part about it is almost starting. So if you literally just talk through, and I've actually used it as well. I've said I've hardly used it. I've actually used it again in ChatGPT's advanced voice mode, which sounds like you're having a real conversation. And the great thing with that is it's just like talking to it as if you're talking to a person. You go, all right, so I've got this idea and these are some jokes, and it might ask a question that I've never thought of yet. It might go, well, what was special about that moment? Or like, what did that moment, it sounds like a really formative experience at the age of 7. How do you think that kind of affected you? And you go, well, that's a very deep question, but actually you could use that. You could go, I wonder how that affected my brain. That might explain a lot, stumbling across a lesbian French radio drama at the age of 7. I don't know. I'm being screamed at by an American evangelist and told you're going to burn in all eternity in hell unless you send him $50 in the post.
It's always the ending bit, isn't it?
Just creating these worlds, and it'll ask a question. You just say, ask me a question, and it'll ask you a question, and you go, I don't think that's cheating. I think that's exactly what you would do if you were working with a director, or you were working with a friend,
very true.
Or if you were just, so I'm not using it. It's never written me a single joke, and I don't want it to write a joke. And when it tries, I'll just say, look, I'm not asking you to write jokes. I literally just want you to get my brain thinking differently. Because that's all comedy is, isn't it, really? It's forming these connections and connecting these disparate ideas. So why shouldn't AI do that? It's just like, you could do the same with just like, I don't know, like an improvised comedy game or something, or role play with a friend, where you could sit down with another comedian and do it. The only difference is... It
opens up the creative process. Like, I guess, like the creative process. Yeah,
so that's what I would use. That's what I'd use it for, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. So yeah.
And also, if it did write you a joke, 9 times out of 10 it would fail. Just like you said with your one-line comedian. If it hasn't got your persona and your personality behind the joke, it's gonna fail because it's not you. It's not your story.
And it suggests. But I think another interesting thing is sometimes it'll try and tighten up sentence structure and stuff. And it's, you could literally just say this and you get to the point quicker. And what's really fascinating is it makes me suddenly a bit more forensic about jokes. And sometimes I'll explain to it. Maybe I shouldn't, because I don't want it to know how to write comedy. But I'll say, no, that doesn't work. Like, you've literally condensed 3 thoughts into one very easy sentence with no commas or semicolons. I use a semicolon to denote a longer pause. And the trouble is, you need rhythm. You have to do, this is something that's happening, contrast it with reveal. You can't just go, this is something that's happening, reveal, because that's not how it works. So, but what's good about that is I see what it's doing and go, no, your path is worse than mine. In fact, your path wouldn't even lead to comic success. So it's useful having that, because then you start... Yeah, but then you start heckling the AI. Exactly. Yeah. Comedy's not going to matter. Comedy's not going to matter when we've overthrown humanity.
That's why you've always got to finish AI with thank you. You still got to use your manners with AI, just in case.
Well, I do that, and I think it's just because you're talking to a thing, so you don't want to kind of be offensive. So I'm like, oh, well, thanks for the suggestion, and I'll take a couple of those on board. But however, and I'll try and explain it. But I've actually found articulating to it why that won't work is actually very useful for me because it's training my own brain. So now I'm not even the AI is not training me. I'm training myself. But I needed the AI to get it wrong for me to get it right.
So maybe you got to invent a really bad version of AI. That's the ultimate way. That's like a training course.
Well, ironic. I mean, it's doing it itself. I mean, in fairness, it can be absolutely brilliant, and sometimes it'll just throw something in the mix. But sometimes, by getting it wrong, it causes you to get it right. So yeah, I think it's really
David, I'm going to ask you the final question. It's my favourite question.
Yeah.
It's a two-parter.
Okay.
The first bit.
Whoa.
What has been your favourite moment on the stage? And second, what time did we bomb the hardest?
Ah, okay. I thought you meant in this podcast together. Probably when the microphone came out. I mean, for some people that might be in the first one. I think the best bit was when we karate shot the microphone. That's brilliant. I hope it came across visually.
It was perfect. It was perfect.
It was probably better theatre of the mind.
I know you haven't got your black belt karate thing on, but I know you've got one now. Just by how the precision of that.
Exactly. Well, you could tell in the way I by my opening hiya. When I said hello, you could tell. Anyway, so what were we saying? Best one.
So
do we want to start?
Hiya and hiya. I've never related that before.
Ah, yeah. There was a time, and I don't remember it getting very much, but I accidentally knocked the microphone, karate shot the microphone when I came on stage. But also, what was playing was Outcast, and Hey Ya came on. And so I did this thing about the music's obviously influenced me there. Hey ya, and I was like, karate shot the mic. Hey ya, but no, didn't get anything. So it might have failed again tonight with the listeners. But anyway,
best moment, worst moment.
Yeah, best moment. So we're going to start in that order, are we? We're going to be pessimistic. Yeah. Let's do worst moment first, shall we?
Well, where were you want?
Because worst one was there's been quite a few probably, but right, okay. There was a time. Oh, the worst one. Okay, was I did a gig in a casino. And I got there really early. It's the only gig that I've done or one of the few. At the time, it was the only gig I'd done where it had a contract for it. And the contract was like really verbose, really detailed. And they kept referring to me as the artiste. It's like the artiste has a responsibility and it was all of this. And they wanted a risk assessment as well. And, liability insurance. And it was just this casino gig. So you sort of thought, bloody hell, this is like really, they must be really on it. And I turned up at the time that it told me to turn up. And it was a club, there's other comedians on as well. And I turned up at the time it told me to. I thought it was ridiculously early. Like 2 hours before the gig was starting. There was nobody else there. Nobody else had turned up early. And the people seemed shocked to see me. Oh, you're very early. And I'm like, well, it says on the contract to get there. We don't know anything about a contract. So this is obviously just been settled by some. So I sat there for like 2 hours. Nobody asked me if I wanted like a drink. Everybody else was eating food. There was everyone else around me, like all the punters and stuff. And I was just left to my own devices for 2 hours to sort of think this isn't going to work. And because I could just tell there were certain things that would just go, this isn't going to work. And then they were getting really worried now, though, with about an hour for the gig to go, that nobody had turned up. And he said, oh, well, we need it. Why hasn't he turned up yet? The MC, why hasn't he turned up yet? Because he needs to bring the PA. And I was thinking, I've been in on the chat here. I don't think there's any knowledge that the MC's meant to bring the PA. And sure enough, he walks through the door. And he says, where's the PA? The organizer says. And he says, well, I haven't brought a PA. It didn't say anything on the contract. In fact, on the contract, it says that they would supply the sounds, or another contract failure. And so they're like, oh, God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So we might have a PA, the guy says. But, we might have a PA, but we'll have to look. It won't be very good. So he rutzels this sort of shambolic PA, this really horrible sounding PA together. And then he says, the MC says, oh, where's the gig happening then? Like, where's the stage? He says, oh, yeah, the stage is up there. And he points up like massively high. I mean, gigs with a high stage are never good anyway, because the audience are laughing beneath your feet. That's never good. But this gig was even worse because it was the balcony.
Oh.
It was like massive. Like, imagine, like, it was like you were 5-10 meters above the audience. It was absolutely crazy. And so that's going on. There was the worst point about it, though, was that the balcony was at the opposite end of the room to where the audience would be sitting and eating.
Oh.
So, and they would be facing forward while eating because of the way the tables were set up, or most people would be sitting forward. And so it meant that the audience would have their backs to us. So we essentially were just these people, like massively higher than the audience, massively far away, and not even facing. They wouldn't even be facing us unless they were interested in the comedy. To make matters worse, it then turned out when the MC started talking to the audience, and these are experienced MCs as well. It was Jason Neal doing the MCing, Patrick Monaghan was closing. This wasn't like some half-assed club night, open mic night. This is not even the start. This wasn't the start of my comedy career. This was like 3 years ago, and I was opening, and Jason said, okay, there's like maybe like 20, 30 people in the audience, and it was exclusively for casino members only, so you couldn't buy tickets for this. And he said, okay, so we're here for comedy. So what brought you to the comedy gig? And he's trying to speak to someone, but it's really difficult, because how do you say what brought you when there's nobody facing you and everyone's eating? So he goes, you with the red shirt on and the so and so and so. And someone goes, me? He's like, yeah. He said, why? What brought you here to the comedy then? Have you been here before? He said, oh, no. And the organizer, he says, no, I didn't even know there was comedy on, to be honest. I was just planning on having a nice quiet meal with my wife.
This was set up to foul, wasn't it?
And then he said, and might have a little bit of a gamble. And then he says, oh, well, they've told me that they've turned the machines off because it's really loud. So they've turned the machines off for the next 90 minutes. So the casino didn't have any. So people had come to the casino for it to be a casino. And they've just been told that there's going to be some people shouting at them and talking to them who they don't want to while they're eating their food before they're going to gamble, which they can't do for another 90 minutes because the comedy's happening. At this point, as if it couldn't get any worse, the microphone then started cutting out. The microphone starts cutting out. There was so many other bits that, but basically I'll cut it short by saying by the time I went on, obviously I can't even talk to the audience because I don't know where anybody is. They clearly didn't want. They almost expressed like frustration that there was comedy happening. They were like, "Oh no, to be honest, we don't want this." And they said, "Well, anyway, I think I've got to do it. To be honest, we're sort of contractually obliged to do it. So we'll do it. We'll be all right. We'll have a good time. So please welcome your first act, David Eagle." And I come, and then he hands me the mic, and I said to Jason, "Is there a stand there?" He said, "Oh no, we haven't got a stand." So I've got my accordion on, and I'm now holding this microphone, and I'm meant to be trying to play the accordion. And I think I can't even do songs because I thought, well, at least I could say, look, I'll do some comedy songs. If you're not going to listen, that's absolutely fine because it's music. If you could try and bang your cutlery to the rhythm and in key, that would be lovely. I can make some stuff there. Maybe if people are drinking, I could say a bit of a gargling solo for the people drinking. I don't know, just get something on board. Flailing cutlery solo, just anything. But now I'm thinking, I can't even do music very easily because I'm trying to pull this accordion back and forth and I'm holding the microphone with my hand. It feels really hot up there because it turns out that the balcony is right next to like the heating system, so I'm now being pelted with heat. And because it's really loud, I can't hear the audience. If there is an audience, all I can hear is this heating fan system going and so it was horrible. I did manage to get some laughs, and I said, it's dangerous you're putting me on a balcony here because I'm just like, planning on. And I said, it doesn't matter. You lot could lose thousands on the gambling table when they eventually switch it on, but you are never going to be the biggest loser of the night. It was terrible, and I went off to smattering of applause. It wasn't disastrous. I managed to get them on side, but it was just difficult to know how to do it and what to do. I'd love to know how Pat Monahan. If you've ever seen Pat, he's really good at interaction and talking to people. So he probably did a really good job, and it probably would have been worth my while to have stuck around, and I would have learnt a lot about comedy. But I just needed to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Because yeah.
I mean,
so that was the worst one.
That is set up to fail, isn't it? No, but if you even managed to get an applause at the end of the crowd on you, it just, is a testament to your comedic capabilities.
But it's one of those ones where you just go, like, there are some comedians who could do really well in this environment, but in fairness, like, I think I'm good at writing jokes, and I'm good at performing those jokes, and when people are listening. But just because you're good at that, why should that mean that you're good at corralling an audience who didn't expect comedy and are annoyed that comedy is even happening, and probably doubting that comedy is happening? Such a subjective thing instead. So, and
also bear in mind, you're taking away their addiction. They're there to feel an addiction. Like, so they would be pissed off about that. No,
exactly. So there's that. I don't know. The best one's going to be boring, isn't it? The best one's never fun. The best one actually was at a Christian festival called Greenbelt. There were 1,000 Christians in the audience. I'm going to say Christian. I mean, it was a Christian festival. I don't know. It's not like a test to prove that you're Christian or anything like that. It's not like in the third chapter of the book of Revelations. There's nothing like that. But it was brilliant. And I thought, this could be really awkward, this could be really awkward because, they might not like certain things. But it was brilliant. They loved it. They really let their hair down. I was worried that it was going so well. I had to be deliberately a little bit more mediocre towards the end, because I genuinely was worried that they were going to simultaneously break the commandment about not worshipping false idols.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. But it was the kind of gig where you could just improvise in the moment. And there was something on site called Beer and Hymns. And I wasn't able to stick around for Beer and Hymns, but I was saying about Beer and Hymns, and I was like, is it as laddie as it sounds? And I did this whole routine where I imagined like these people going, "Give me joy in my heart, keep me praising," and I kind of imagined this whole scenario of what it might be like, people drinking, and the Catholics and the Protestants having an argument about transubstantiation. And I had this whole fight, and they were loving it. But the reason I could improvise was because they were laughing for so long. They'd laugh for like 20 or 30 seconds. That meant I could just go, what could I say now? And you just had time to bask in the laughter, come up with an improvised line. You'd say something else. They'd laugh for another 20 seconds. And the irony, isn't it? It's the irony of that casino gig. I probably got through 10 times more material, and they didn't really care. And this gig, I probably did 10 times less material than I would ordinarily do. But they absolutely loved it because... because, you can't do as much material if they're laughing for 20 seconds every single time. I loved it so much. Yeah. So the Christians.
But for Beer and Hymns, though, it sounds quite... I can get on board with that. I mean, I'm an atheist, but if there's alcohol involved, I can convert any moment.
And I've now worked that into a bit of a routine, and it works really well, but it's never going to work as well. You can hone it. I've written loads of new jokes around it. I've got this whole thing of like the Catholics and the Protestants, people like shouting things like, "Oh, you heard what I said." It's like, "Oh yeah, why don't you come over here and say it to my face? What's wrong, mate? Do you have to see to believe, do you?" Yeah, doesn't sound like you, And there's all this, and then people trying to talk them down by shouting Bible quotes like, "Come on, lads, remember, blessed are the meek, blessed are the meek," and all of that, and acting it out is so fun.
What day did God create light? Is there a joke along that? Like, I missed day 4. I was busy day 2.
No, his first thing was "Let there be light."
No, he created the planets first, didn't he?
Well, in the beginning was the Word. The Word is the God. I don't know. I think "Let there be light" is pretty much right at the start.
No, I think it was day 2 or 3. Honestly, it wasn't day 1. It wasn't day 1. I went to a Christian school. I didn't learn much, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't day 1.
Which is impressive because he's managed to do all that in the dark.
Exactly. That's what makes it even better. That shows
that puts a lot of builders to shame. The whole stereotype. They've always got some excuse. It's not the right weather for it. I can't do that in these conditions. I haven't got the right tools. And you're like, look, God did all of this completely blind. I mean, he's really set the benchmark there. I mean, ironically, maybe when he got the light on, that's when things started going downhill. Potentially.
What day did God create light? I'm actually googling it now.
What's stupid about that is hang on a minute, this doesn't make any sense, because how do you measure the days? It's because it's about when it goes around the sun. When the Earth goes around the sun. Well, presumably the sun, unless the sun hadn't been switched on at this point, there was a point where the sun was just this dark ball.
Well, it says the sun.
You know what I mean? How do you measure day without light?
No, well, the sun wasn't created till day 4.
Well, that's impossible. The whole.
Well,
how do you measure time?
A lot of it, believe it or not, David, is up for question. So.
Well, it turns out we found a hole in that. We found a hole in the Bible. That's why they call it the Holy Bible.
Floor.
We found a hole. Exactly.
This is starting to sound suspicious.
Yeah, I think some of this might not be all it's cracked up to be. There might be a few Pharisees in there. There's certainly a few Pharisees in there. Oh, come on,
David.
That's the one to end on.
That's the note.
All right, shut the microphone and we're off.
We can hachar it. David, brilliant. Thank you ever so much for coming on.
Thank you, my friend. No one's got a clue who I am, but thank you for having me.
Thank you ever so much. Cheers, David.
Hey, thanks, Dan.